Have you ever wondered if what you believe yourself to be is, in truth, the entirety of your existence? Or if, perhaps, there is an ancestral memory, an echo of your true identity, dormant in the depths of your soul, waiting to be awakened? What if I were to reveal to you that humanity, throughout its historical evolution, has been subjected to a primordial forgetting, an amnesia deliberately orchestrated to keep the inherent power of each being nailed? Prepare yourself, for we will enter the threshold of a revelation that few have dared even to whisper about, a technique forbidden by the custodians of ignorance, but jealously preserved by the true guardians of cosmic wisdom. We speak of the enigmatic technique of Thoth, an architect of light and master of secrets, whose method transcends mere knowledge to touch the very essence of your being, awakening that which your soul has forgotten, who you truly are. This is not a mere story. It is a key, an invitation to transmute your perception of reality, to shed the illusory veils that society, ego, and time have woven over your consciousness. The civilizations of ancient times, from the priest sages of ancient Egypt, the Vedic rishis of ancient India, to the Gnostic philosophers of Hellenistic Greece, shared a profound understanding. Humanity does not need to learn something new, but rather to remember what is already inscribed in its most intimate code in the very fiber of its being. They understood that upon incarnation, the soul experiences a frequency drop, a kind of sacred amnesia that disconnects us from our divine essence. But they also knew the path of return, the path that leads us back to wholeness, to the original vibration of our soul. This knowledge, so valuable and potentially disruptive, was jealously guarded, transmitted in the secrecy of the temples, from word of mouth to ear, only to those initiates who demonstrated the purity of intention and internal preparation necessary to avoid distorting their power with the shadows of the ego. You will understand why an awakened and self-aware consciousness is unmanipulable. Let's explore the foundations of this primordial forgetting and unravel why the key to your awakening lies not in the accumulation of external information, but in deep introspection, purifying silence, and meditation that dissolves the layers of the false self. I will reveal to you the dangers that lurk for the reckless seeker who ventures unguided onto the paths of higher consciousness, where the ego, that master of illusion, can transform from guardian into jailer. We will look into the ritual of symbolic death, that initiatory experience that allowed the ancients to cross the veil and access forgotten truths, to resonate with the vibration of their invisible name. We will discuss the first phase of this technique, which consists of dissolving the illusory identity forged by fears and expectations, so that, from that stillness, the single I emerges an unfiltered, direct, and pure perception. This is the path to the reintegration of your shadows, to the deep healing that accompanies the light of memory. If you feel these words resonate in your deepest core, if the promise of revealing who you truly are compels you, then I invite you to join this expedition into the depths of your being. This is just the beginning of a journey that promises authentic and transformative revelations. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss a single fragment of this ancient wisdom, and share this video with those who feel the call of truth. Leave a comment as your interaction fuels this collective journey. Your first step toward remembrance begins now. We have already crossed the threshold of inner silence, dissolving the masks that the ego, that skilled craftsman of illusion, painstakingly weaves. But the journey toward remembering our essence does not end there. In fact, it only begins when we dare to contemplate what was deliberately veiled. Today, we will delve into the heart of an uncomfortable truth, the existence of an ancient technique, so powerful that it allowed the soul to recognize itself in its pure state, stripped of artifice. A practice so liberating that its mere existence represented a threat to the architects of control, to those who delight in the manipulation of sleeping consciences. This is the story of a hidden wisdom, a silent echo of your true identity that has patiently waited for millennia to be rediscovered by those with the courage to look beyond the veil woven by collective amnesia and the imposition of an alien reality. History, my dear seekers, is not as linear as we have been told. In the shadows of forbidden records, in scrolls that burned, and in traditions that were silenced by sword and dogma, we find clues to this concealment. It is revealed to us that in ages past, entire communities flourished in the light of this self-awareness. Individuals fully aware of their inherent divinity, their unbreakable connection to the cosmic fabric, proved by nature unmanipulating. Their minds could not be colonized by fear. Their spirits did not bend to empty promises or threats from external power. Can you imagine a world where every human being resonated with this inalienable truth? The structures of control, the empires, founded on servitude and blind obedience, would crumble like sandcastles before the tide of consciousness. This was the true crime of this technique, its ability to awaken the sleeping lion in the human heart, making it sovereign over itself. Engineering of this forgetting was a masterpiece of subtlety and persistence. It wasn't just a matter of eradicating texts or persecuting their practitioners, but of infiltrating spiritual and philosophical currents themselves, distorting their essence and diverting the seeker into labyrinths of empty symbols or promises. Of external salvation, a culture of dependency was created, where authority over one's soul was delegated to institutions or gurus, distancing the individual from their center. Technology, once a direct path to memory, was fragmented, its components scattered, its principles veiled under layers of complex rituals and incomprehensible dogmas, or, worse still, reduced to mere acts of faith without the inner alchemy that confers true transformative power. Thus, the most valuable knowledge became inert to the masses, while a few guarded it or used it for their own ends. But the cosmos is a master of revelation, and no truth can be buried forever. What reaches us from this forbidden technique? Glimpses of what was speaks to a process of radical disidentification, an invitation to let go of every attachment, every imposed belief, every reactive emotion, until only pure observation remains. It involves an immersion in the river of unknowing, where the mind, accustomed to labeling and classifying, learns to dissolve into the vast ocean of consciousness. It is a path of relentless discernment, where every illusion is exposed to the light of truth, not to destroy it, but to see through it. Those who dare to undertake this inner journey face resistance from the ego itself, which fights for its survival, but the reward is the clear vision of transcendent identity, a vision that redefines reality and the purpose of existence. Awakening to this essential identity is not just an individual act. It is a beacon lighting the way for others, a catalyst for collective resonance. The technique, once rediscovered and practiced, deactivates the invisible control mechanisms operating in the human psyche, unleashing a power that has lain dormant for eons. It makes you an epicenter of consciousness, an anchoring point for truth in a sea of illusions. The liberation of a single being resonates throughout the entire fabric of existence, creating fissures in the old order, allowing the light of personal sovereignty to filter through and spread. But what are the concrete steps of this disidentification? How does one navigate the turbulent waters of the unconscious without foundering? We will delve into the precise phases of this process in our next communion, revealing the tools that were denied to us. Friends, on the journey, we have spoken of disidentification, of the liberation of the ego, and of dormant power. But what is it with which we disidentify? Where does this existential amnesia that binds us arise? Let us delve into an echo that resonates through the millennia, a wisdom that ancient civilizations, with their deep connection to the numinous, already sensed humanity's primordial forgetfulness. It is a veil woven not only of ignorance, but of a fall, a lowering of the soul's vibrational frequency upon incarnation, immersing us in a sea of limited perceptions that distance us from our divine essence. It is not a simple distraction, but a fracture in cosmic memory, an exile from the truth that has shaped our reality for countless ages, leaving us adrift, searching without knowing what we are seeking. In the Nile Valley, the priests of Kemet already whispered about this mystery. For them, the soul, or Ba, along with the life force Ka, descended from the stars, a fragment of the divine cosmos, to inhabit an earthly body. But this descent did not come at a price. Upon crossing the threshold of life, the soul was believed to forget its stellar lineage, its knowledge acquired in the Duat and the higher realms. It was a veil of consciousness, not of the very existence of knowledge. The instructions of Tahotep and the pyramid texts offered not only guides to the afterlife, but also keys to remembrance, to drawing back the veil of Maya before the term was coined in other latitudes, a process of awakening to one's true nature beyond the illusions of the material world, a search for reunification with the primordial source from which we detached ourselves. Across oceans and eras, in the vast expanse of ancient India, this same truth manifested itself with astonishing clarity. The Upanishads and the Vedas describe the Atman, the individual soul, as a spark of Brahman, the supreme reality, but veiled by the illusion of Maya. Upon incarnation, the Atman plunges into samsara, the cycle of births and deaths, forgetting its essential unity with the divine. This is not a punishment, but a necessary experience for evolution, an opportunity to remember, to shed the layers of identification with the ego and the phenomenal world. The drop in frequency was understood as the densification of consciousness, which, vibrating more slowly, lost the ability to perceive the fullness of its origin, becoming trapped in duality and sensory limitations. And what can we say about the Hellenes, those thinkers who dared to scrutinize the psyche and the cosmos with unparalleled audacity? Plato, through his dialogues, articulated the famous theory of anamnesis, the idea that knowledge is not acquired, but remembered. The soul, before descending into the body, contemplated the pure forms, the eternal ideas in the intelligible world. At birth, this vision became blurred, veiled by the forgetfulness inherent in matter. Life thus became a search, not for the new, but for the recovery of the forgotten, a process of purification and ascent through reason and contemplation. The Orphic and Pythagorean schools, with their esoteric rites and teachings, also spoke of the transmigration of the soul and the need to free oneself from the circle of births. A clear allusion to this cosmic amnesia and the need to transcend it. These cultures, separated by geography and time, converged on a central revelation. Humanity, in its current state, lives in a veil of forgetting, a drop in frequency that has caused us to lose touch with our divine essence. The soul is not a blank canvas at birth, but an ancient scroll with hidden texts, waiting to be unrolled and read again. The frequency drop is not a condemnation, but a transitory state, an evolutionary challenge. If civilizations of old understood the nature of this primordial forgetting and its mechanisms, what implications does this have for our quest for disidentification? What tools, what ancient methods remain hidden in plain sight, waiting to be rediscovered to initiate the ascent and reclaim our lost heritage? Brothers and sisters on the path of veiled truth, we have been conditioned to believe that our mind is an empty receptacle, waiting to be filled with the incessant torrent of external information. We are taught that knowledge is acquired, learned, as if it were an external object to be possessed. But this is one of the greatest deceptions of the veil of illusion, a forced amnesia that has distanced us from our true nature. The most ancient esoteric traditions, from the Vedas to the Gnostic Gospels and Hermetic whispers, agree on a fundamental revelation. The soul, before incarnating in material density, already contains the totality of cosmic wisdom. It is a living library, a personal Akashic record, safeguarding not only the history of our incarnations, but the vast universe of primordial ideas. Forgetfulness, then, is not a lack, but a layer, a dense sediment that immersion in matter deposits on our perception, like dust covering a pristine mirror. The true key, therefore, lies not in the laborious effort of learning something new, but in the subtle and profound art of remembering what is already inscribed in the most intimate fiber of our being. It is a journey inward, an archaeology of the soul. To draw back these veils, to cleanse that ancestral mirror, the paths lie not in the accumulation of data or the voracious consumption of foreign doctrines, but in a radical turn toward introspection. This is not mere psychological self-observation. It is a deliberate immersion in the depths of consciousness, a descent into the silent temple where the inner oracle resides. The ancient masters, from the Pythagoreans to the Sufis, understood that only by withdrawing our attention from external turmoil, from the clamor of opinions and sensory distractions, can we begin to hear the echo of our primordial memory, ancestral voice that whispers eternal truths to us. And in this descent, silence emerges as the sacred threshold, the invisible door to that chamber of memory. We are not speaking here of the simple absence of external noise, but of the profound stillness of the mind, the cessation of the incessant chatter of the ego, the rumination of trivial concerns, and the projection of uncertain futures. Have you noticed how modern society, in its frenzy, flees from silence, filling every moment with thunder, with a maelstrom of stimuli? This is not fortuitous, for in silence, the illusion of separation weakens, and the archaic voices of inner truth begin to resonate with unmistakable clarity. The esoteric brotherhoods and ascetics of old, seeking enlightenment in the desert or on mountaintops, knew that only by silencing the outer and inner worlds could they tune into the frequency of the divine, allowing inherent wisdom to reveal itself. It is in the bed of this cultivated silence that meditation becomes the alchemical vehicle par excellence, the conscious practice of anamnesis, the primordial remembering. It is not an active search for something lost, but a surrender to the flow of being, an act of faith in the inexhaustible richness of the spirit. Through focusing on the breath, a resonant mantra, a visualization of light, or simply the pure emptiness of consciousness, the mental sensor is deactivated, and symbols, intuitions, archetypes, and veiled knowledge begin to ascend from the depths of the subconscious to the conscious, like submerged relics emerging to the surface of a crystalline lake. It is a reconstruction of the star map that guides our soul, a deciphering of the codices engraved in our spiritual DNA, a reconfiguration of the very perception of reality. This inner alchemy, this process of unlearning in order to remember, is not a mere intellectual acquisition. It is a metamorphosis of being, a transfiguration of consciousness. The truth revealed in this state is not a truth imposed from outside, but a truth that resonates, that is felt in every fiber, that awakens an unshakable conviction that is deeper than any logic. It is the awakening of the inherent knowledge that resides within each of us, freeing us from dependence on external sources and granting us sovereignty over our own knowledge. But the path of remembrance is not without its challenges. Once we begin to glimpse the magnitude of our own cosmic library, how do we navigate the complex webs of this reality that insists on amnesia? How do we integrate this ancient wisdom into a world that still dances to the rhythm of forgetting? True mastery lies not only in remembering, but in knowing how to apply that sacred memory to transcend the veils of the present and unleash our true potential, a journey we have only just begun to unveil. And as we delve into the next layers of this mystery, we will discover that remembering is not an end in itself, but the key to discerning the nature of the illusions that, surround us. We have discussed the vast cosmic library that resides within us and how remembering is the key to discerning the veiled illusions of this reality. But behold, my friends, the act of remembering is not enough in itself. There is a profound reason, as ancient as the stars that look down upon us, why these teachings, as luminous as they are dangerous, were transmitted in the strictest secrecy, whispered from master to disciple in the depths of temples, guarded by veils and oaths of silence. Why such zeal? Because pure knowledge, the unveiled truth, is an extremely powerful force, capable of transmuting, but also of annihilating if the vessel that contains it is not properly prepared. Imagine a sacred fire handed over to inexperienced hands. It will not illuminate, but will consume mercilessly. The protection of knowledge was not an act of exclusion, but of profound wisdom and love for humanity, a safeguard against the self-destruction inherent in ignorance cloaked in power. This guarded arcane was not a material treasure, but the very essence of existence, and its reckless handling could unleash forces that the unprepared soul simply could not contain, distorting the perception of reality to unsuspected limits and plunging the seeker into abysses of illusion, even deeper than those he sought to transcend. The most insidious danger lurked not outside, but within the inner sanctum of our own psyche, the ego. This illusory self, his self-proclaimed Shadow King, yearns to possess and control. When transcendent knowledge, truths about universal interconnectedness and the inherent power of being, fell into the hands of an unpurified ego, distortion was inevitable and catastrophic. Teachings about creation became formulas for domination. Understandings of the soul became tools for manipulation. Knowledge of cosmic energy became fuel for unbridled ambition. The ancient masters, the priests of Thoth, and the sages of Atlantis understood that the ego, lacking the humility and perspective of the spirit, would corrupt the highest wisdom, transforming it into a double-edged sword. The heretical texts of Alexandria, those forbidden fragments that spoke of a spiritual science without ethics, are silent testimony to this truth. Knowledge without conscience is the seed of chaos, a promise of power that, when unbalanced, only breeds destruction and submission. Those guardians of ancient knowledge did not fear the truth. They feared the man who, with his inflated ego, would use it to forge chains instead of liberating. Thus, transmission took place under a veil of mystery, orally in sacred precincts where every word was a rite and every silence a revelation. In Egyptian temples, Pythagorean schools, and Eleusinian sanctuaries, access to knowledge was not a rite, but a conquest of the spirit, an inner pilgrimage that began with preparation. The aspirant was subjected to tests, periods of purification, deep meditation, and selfless service, forging their character and tempering their will. Only when the soul demonstrated its maturity, its capacity for discernment, and its lack of selfishness, did the layers of the veil begin to be lifted, and the secrets were revealed in a symbolic language, designed to be decoded by intuition, not by the linear mind. This process ensured that knowledge was not simply an intellectual accumulation, but a transformative experience, an infusion of light that was integrated into every fiber of the being, transforming the student into a conscious custodian of truth, not a mere bearer of information. Internal preparation was, therefore, the supreme filter, the guarantee that the sacred seed would germinate in fertile soil. The consequences of ignoring this internal preparation still resonate in our history and in the fragmentation of truth. Today, when teachings were torn from their sacred context, expounded without proper rites of passage, and without the oversight of conscience, the result was the creation of rigid dogmas, blind fanaticism, and power struggles in the name of a truth that had been perverted. Ancient myths and symbols, conceived as maps for the soul, were taken literally, becoming tools of control and fear, distorting the perception of divinity and one's own human potential. This loss of mystical perspective and the literalization of the arcane led to the persecution of those who still guarded the original threads of wisdom, burying the very essence of what it meant to be a seeker under layers of self-serving ignorance. Thus, what was once a path to enlightenment became, in the hands of the collective ego, an instrument of division and conflict, cementing the illusions that today challenge us to unravel, perpetuating the forgetfulness of our most valuable heritage. And the true purpose of our existence on this plane, inner alchemy, then, is not only a path to remembering, but a forge for the spirit, a crucible where the ego is transmuted and the vessel of being purified. Before yearning to unveil the deepest mysteries, we must cultivate humility, compassion, and pure intention. It is a call to look within, to examine our own motivations. Do we seek knowledge to serve or to dominate, to liberate or to chain? Only when our internal preparation is solid, when we have tamed the ego beasts that dwell in our shadows, can we receive the light without being blinded? Can we wield the sword of truth without harming ourselves or others? This discernment, however, brings us to a crossroads, a threshold beyond which veiled truths await, but only for those whose hands have been purified by understanding and whose minds have been tempered in the forge of humility. For the following riddle will reveal to us the guardians and the guardians of the guardians, those who watch over the threshold of forbidden knowledge. Beloved seekers, to transcend the threshold, it is imperative to understand symbolic death. It is not physical extinction, but the conscious dissolution of worldly identity, an alchemical act where the old gives way to the essential. This practice, central to ancestral temples, involves a metamorphosis of consciousness. It is the shedding of egoic vestments that anchor us to the illusion of separation. Like the caterpillar, that dissolves into a chrysalis for the butterfly, we must empty the vessel of what we believe ourselves to be. Only then will it be filled with the immensity of who we are, freeing the soul toward veiled truths beyond ordinary perception. In Eleusis or in shamanic caves, this rite was a tangible experience, orchestrated with ancient precision. The initiate was stripped of sensory and mental anchors, plunging into depths where the rational mind relinquished its tyranny. Absolute darkness, fasting, monotonous chanting, and even sacred elixirs converged to induce an altered state of consciousness. The purpose: to free the psyche from its corporeal prison and habitual patterns. It was not escape, but a deliberate confrontation with the shadow, transcending fears to see beyond the material illusion, breaking the veils that separate us from our primordial essence. When the veil of the personal self dissolved, the initiate experienced profound dissociation, not physical, but an expansion of consciousness beyond its limits. It was an inner journey, a descent into forgotten realms of the soul, where linear time and space lost their hold. The forgotten truths were not concepts, but lived revelations, epiphanies of ancestral memories, connections to the cosmic web, direct understanding of intrinsic unity. The soul, freed from corporeal density, remembered its divine origin, its eternal purpose, and its indissoluble connection with the universal source of knowledge. Vision became internal, hearing perceived, the whisper of the universe. The purpose of this journey was not curiosity, but a radical transformation of being. Access to these truths allowed the initiate to confront the illusion of mortality, dissolve the fear of death, and understand the eternal cyclicality of life and spirit. They returned with a renewed sense of purpose, endowed with ineffable wisdom, only experienced. They became beacons of light for their communities, bearers of knowledge that transcended the mundane. This mystical experience was the master key to navigating life fully, making decisions aligned with the cosmic will, and healing the wounds of the individual and collective soul, restoring lost balance. With the passing of the ages and the proliferation of materialism, these rites were relegated to oblivion, demonized, or simplified. However, their echo persists in the architecture of our psyche. Symbolic death manifests itself even today in existential crises, in moments of rupture that force us to reevaluate everything we are, in challenges that invite us to shed old skins. The question is, how can we recreate this ancestral right? In our world, how can we cross this veil without the guidance of the lost temples? Because beyond this ritual of detachment, the guardians of that knowledge await, beings and forces that watch over the doors of perception and reveal themselves only to intentions as pure as the light of dawn. Yet, on this sacred threshold, where the light of the cosmic dawn promises revelation, lurks a cunning shadow, an inner guardian of illusion, more fearsome than any mythical beast that guards dimensional portals, the ego. While the intention of many seekers is pure in yearning for these higher states of consciousness, the path is fraught with insidious dangers for those who have not purified their own vessels. A promise of enlightenment can become a glorious mirage if the vessel is not prepared to contain the truth. The sages of ancient times in their mystery schools vehemently warned against the risk of spiritual hubris, that arrogance of the soul that mistakes the echo of the divine voice for its own. They taught us that cosmic light, when it falls upon a mirror clouded by self-indulgence and the search for external validation, is not reflected as pure wisdom, but is distorted into a magnified projection of one's own shadow. The ego doesn't disappear simply by seeking. It camouflages itself, disguises itself, and becomes a spiritual wolf. Observe how this entity, which you thought you had mastered, re-emerges in new guise on the path of self-knowledge. It hides behind a false humility, swelling with each revelation, claiming authorship of universal truth. Ancient manuscripts, veiled from the profane gaze and preserved in vaults of occult knowledge, describe how the lower self does not vanish, but mutates, taking on subtle forms to perpetuate its reign. It becomes the savior of spiritual causes, the enlightened one who must guide others, the possessor of exclusive and superior knowledge. This metamorphosis of the ego is, perhaps, the greatest deception in the Odyssey toward the transcendent. The seeker, intoxicated by lofty visions or sensations, can mistake the exaltation of the self for the dissolution of the self, falling into the trap of a spiritual vanity that distances them from the genuine humility and service that are the true essence of awakening. The dangers are profound and multifaceted. By attempting to access higher states of consciousness without proper preparation, without having dismantled egoic structures through rigorous introspection and shadow work, the ego becomes the great distorter. What could be a pure connection to the source is filtered through the lenses of our wounds, fears, and unresolved desires. The ancestral wisdom of Amazonian shamans, for example, insisted on long periods of purification and fasting before ceremonies with sacred plants, not only because of physical toxicity, but also to cleanse the spirit of egoic influences that could distort the message of the divine. Visions are interpreted as confirmations of one's own superiority. Spiritual gifts are displayed as trophies. Compassion is reduced to a tool to gain admiration. Instead of an expansion of the soul, there is a consolidation of the prison of self, now adorned with gold and spiritual gems, but a prison nonetheless. This spiritual vanity is a disease of the soul, subtle and difficult to diagnose for those who suffer from it. It leads the individual to believe themselves above others, to judge those who do not share their truths or experiences, and to lose the capacity for genuine empathy. The esoteric traditions of Egypt and the Eleusinian mysteries always emphasized moral and ethical preparation as an indispensable preamble to any initiation. It was not just about external rituals, but a profound inner alchemy where the lead of the ego was transmuted into the gold of humility before the veil was lifted. When this transmutation is ignored, the mystical experience, instead of a catalyst for unity, becomes a fertilizer for separation. strengthening the barriers between the individual and the cosmos, between the self and the other. The seeker becomes a spiritual tyrant, consciously or unconsciously, manipulating others with their apparent light. The true path to higher consciousness is not built on the ego, but on its dissolution. It requires unconditional surrender, detachment from outcomes, and a radical humility that allows the light of the universe to pass through unfiltered and undistorted. Proper preparation is not a mere formality, but the shaping of a soul that can harbor truth without corrupting it. As the ancient alchemists sought the philosopher's stone through the purification of matter, the seeker of truth must purify their own being, freeing themselves from the shackles of self so that the spirit can flourish. It is a journey of stripping, not accumulation. Only then, when the ego has been acknowledged, understood, and transcended, can consciousness ascend unhindered without falling into the trap of spiritual grandiosity. But how does one shed what one believes oneself to be, the self-identity, woven over countless lifetimes to embrace the vast and terrifying void of non-existence? What is the true nature of that identity that persists even beyond the shadow of the ego? Thus, the identity that persists beyond the shadow of the ego is not a possession to be acquired, but the silent resonance of the primordial emptiness. It is the formless essence that, freed from the shackles of the self, reveals itself as the infinite consciousness we always were. A drop that is an ocean, a universe in every particle of our being, waiting to be recognized not as an achievement, but as our true and eternal nature. But if this truth is the path, how does one move from intellectual recognition to the profound experience of this formless unity? And what transformations await the consciousness that dares to dissolve its last ties? If the spark of these truths ignites your soul and you yearn to explore deeper paths of wisdom, I invite you to join our Brotherhood of Seekers. Subscribe to this channel so that the light of ancestral enlightenment continues to guide your steps. Share this message with those hearts that sense the call of the transcendent, allowing this inner alchemy to inspire more souls in their awakening dot. And for those spirits willing to lift a new veil on this journey toward fulfillment, I invite you to our next exploration, the mirror of existence, unveiling duality and unity, where we will delve into the paradoxes that hide the true nature of reality. Until then, may your search be a journey into the infinity of your own being.